Peace. What it is, it's your brother Tavon Swingo, aka the Orthodox Moor. Wishing you all peace and blessings. And saying what's happening, fam. Uh, this is going to be an interesting show. I'm going to cover a lot of information. I'm going to cover a few studies, go over a couple of videos or whatnot. So definitely grab your pens and your pads, etc. But this will not be the first time, this will be the first time I cover some stuff, but this will not be the last time you see this information covered. It will be covered quite often and on repeat for some time to come. But real quick, I actually want to share my screen right quick, just for a quick second, so y'all can see what it is. So y'all see right there, can DNA be used to prove the Bible? The CMH versus YAP. The Cohen Modal Haplotype versus YAP. This is going to be a very interesting breakdown of two different paradigms on how people understand how to track the people of the Bible in modern times and with current methodology, etc., whatnot. But before I get into that, I actually want to give a shout out to Vocab. Vocab was saying some kind words about YEP, and we've had some public interactions as of late, and I wanted to just show some of those right quick. So let me show another one. By the way, I hope y'all are having a good evening. There we go.
Claims like that. Now imagine if you're out on the street, you could become bewildered because it's like essentially an alternative view of history that these folks hold to.
Correct.
It's an entirely way of looking at everything. And fortunately, Dr. Brown was able to call him out on that. But that's just one of their conspiracy theories. Now, again, most of the conversation we've been having centers on the one West Hebrew Israelites. The Hebrew Israelites who live in Dimona, Israel, the group called the African Hebrew Israelites of Jerusalem, they use standard Hebrew. So not all of them embrace all these conspiracy theories, but they will agree on the basic thesis that Black Americans are Israelites. You know what I mean? But they don't all agree on the other things.
That's interesting.
That helps.
Yeah, I think I've said this before to you. It would be like a lot of them I don't see trying to trace their ancestry to like Ethiopia. They're doing something else, which would have been, I suppose, maybe a more natural thing to do that you could have some grounding for, correct?
Yes. In fact, the very first established groups, one of the very first, not the very first, one of the very first established groups in Harlem, New York, established in 1919, called the Commandment Keepers, initially used language to describe themselves like this: the Royal Order of the Ethiopian Hebrews. So the very first, some of the very first guys, like in Harlem, who got a hold of this. Now, Hebrew Islamism didn't start in Harlem. It grew a lot out of Harlem, but it actually started in the South. And then the people spread the message from Arkansas and Oklahoma to the country, and it grew especially in the East Coast. And then you have Harlem being a growth center. But they actually did use that. And so they would try to tie themselves to Ethiopia. And some of their leaders, some of their rabbis, as they would call them, would take trips to Ethiopia and act as if sort of it was like a covering for them almost. But a lot of Hebrewites since then have dropped that kind of pretense and said, no, that's not what's going on here. That's not what's going on here. And so, one time I had a Hebrew Israelite caller and I said, look, you can't determine your ancestry by a special feeling that you think you get.
Yeah.
And I had a Hebrew Israelite last week do a whole video response on my comment saying, well, Vocab's not a spiritual man. He doesn't get that special feeling, so he doesn't understand. But we do, because we know who we are.
Why not just take like ancestry DNA tests?
They will say, most of them, especially the One West variety, they'll say DNA is not an established science. They just wipe it off. They say, well, I don't buy that. It's not valid. It's not valid science. And so they just discount it. They just say it doesn't count as evidence, basically. Now, there is a very small percentage of Hebrew Israelites who get into DNA. Most of them do it sort of illegitimately. They play games with it. Some actually know what they're talking about. One group in particular, they're not a camp. They're more like an internet collective research group called the YAP gang. They actually know something about DNA. And they disagree with almost all these camps and groups out here. They have a much more nuanced position and understanding. They maybe, I think, often some of their theories, some of it gets kind of complicated. So I'm not acting like I even understand all the nuances of their position within their group. Now, it's a smaller group. I don't want to say they're super influential, but they have some influence because they know what they're talking about to a large degree. But they disagree with almost everything that camps and those guys say. They don't buy into the 12 tribes chart. The 12 tribes chart's insane because regardless of if you agree with DNA or not, you have people on there who on the maternal line, and that's what the Hebrew Israelites count. I'm sorry, did I say paternal? I'm sorry, maternal. I meant to say paternal, excuse me. The father's side, on the paternal line, you have people who have radically different haplogroups smashed together on the 12 tribes chart. Regardless of what you think about long-term DNA studies or not, what that means is that they don't have the same male ancestor. Like definitively, they don't. That's what that means. But they don't care about that. So those smash them up. Groups like the YAP gang, which I said is a smaller kind of minority group, but I appreciate the work they do. They'll say that's nonsense because they know it's nonsense. But a lot of the Hebrews, in fact, Dr. Brown, we just played this clip. He recently debated Gorilla Hebrew, who's a leader of the Sakari sect, and it was a very good debate, by the way. And they had a brief discussion of DNA, which I think would be interesting. People can watch that on my channel. Just look for Dr. Brown and pull up that debate. And there's a section where they discuss the genetics. And so genetics is not something that most of them use as a legitimate proof. The ones that do play games with it, like Ron Dalton Jr., kind of just, he does a snow job, old term for just lying, basically. And some of the ones who do know what they're talking about, they don't agree with most Hebrew Israelites. That's my perception anyway at this point, as far as the genetics element.
Okay. So how fringe, by the way, this is a question coming in.
First of all, shout out to vocab for that. I appreciate the attempt to give him flowers and whatnot. Still kind of lumping us up there with the Hebrew Israelites and whatnot, and we'll have to address that. But I also definitely appreciate the fact that he's letting people know that we know what we're talking about when it comes to DNA, etc. I would definitely like to know what he's saying we're off about concerning the model. That's the second time I believe I've heard him mention something about that. But he will not get into specifics. Like he won't get into specifics as to why he's calling us Hebrew Israelites, as to what doctrine we uphold that somehow magically checks his 6 essentials that we do not check off, of which we do not agree with in any way, shape, or form. But he's also stipulating something's off with the model, and he's not saying what it is. I suspect I know what it is, and I'm going to touch on it here, but I definitely appreciate the fact that he's saying that we know what we're talking about when it comes to DNA. There's a couple of things I'm going to address, a couple of assumptions that are also made in that particular video I'm going to address, but I'm going to go ahead and play a couple more. Shout out to everybody in the building. Let's see, where am I at? Just a couple more to play here.
In that type of term. So it's been used in so many different ways that, yeah, people, when they hear that term, they usually think of something negative.
All right. Now let's wrap up with just a few more questions so we won't have too long to discuss it. But I want to try to do this to maybe talk about some things that might be differences. But I don't know exactly there. So you and I think would both affirm the diversity of ancient and modern Jewry. The diversity. We would also, I think, affirm that someone who is either Jewish by being in some way descended from Abraham or obviously convert can kind of look any kind of way. There's no limit or parameter on there, especially when we're talking about it in 2023. But I think you would affirm that Igbo are Israelites, and if I understand you correctly, and I do not think that's correct. But help me understand your position briefly, because I didn't want to make the whole show about this, but I just wanted to talk about this too, because it's interesting and all that. Tell me about that, please.
So the Igbo, and it's often spelled with the G. Sometimes it's not with the IBO, but it's pronounced Igbo. They are a tribe in West Africa, largely in Nigeria, but they're also in other areas of West Africa as well. I believe Benin is
40,000. How many?
40 million.
Why do I always do that? I always do that. I know the number's big, and I always say 40,000. I'm sorry, I apologize, but okay.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yes, yes. So they are, and let me say right off the bat, every Igbo doesn't believe about his own Israelite identity, meaning there's even debate within that tribe, right? But having said that, the research that I've done and the colleagues that I have, one premier one would be Mr. Remy Alona. Y'all can Google him as well. Remy
I know
Alona.
who that is.
You know who that is? Yes, sir. Have you interviewed him before? No.
No. Oh, I haven't. But go ahead.
Okay. Yes. So he is one of the premier voices that he's actually a professor now at UC Riverside. He's from Nigeria, of course, not living in the States. His work and others as well for the receipts. And I talk about that. I'm not just talking about just some folklore thing. I'm talking about the type of Omanana is what they would call their version of Torah or Torah principles, if you will. And having read through, seen, and talked with other rabbis, other religious Jews who are not even Igbo, right, from different sects. There's great debate about it still, just for people can have some context. There was great debate about the Ethiopian Jews to this day, not as much as then, but to this day, there's still people who debate about Beta Israel, whether or not the Ethiopian Jews are actually real Jews. So it's a similar type of debate there. So based on the readings that I've done, the things that I have seen, the conversations that I've had with people much more knowledgeable about it than me, having gone through those receipts, had over the years become convinced that there is truth and veracity to the Igbo claims of Israelite heritage. That's from mine. That's a short version.
So what do you think practical ramifications or applications for that would be? For example, could it then extend into other people, Fulani, or I'm sorry, is that the right? Ashanti, could it extend out? How deep could that go? How limited is it that across the African continent we have people that you would see as descendants of Israelites? What do you think about that? Because I know we're talking about the Igbo, but who else?
Right. So for me, again, this is for me, and obviously I speak for organization, through the narrow lens of the Igbo, when we're talking about that particular Israelite claim, that's the work that we have done in terms of reading, checking out, talking, going to lectures, and having those conversations. I am aware, and I have been aware of this for a long time, right? Of the Ashanti claims. I'm aware of some of the other Yoruba claims, the different ones. As a matter of fact, I did my DNA a couple of years ago. I'm like 80-something% Yoruba, right? And I've had others tell me, yeah, these are Israelites as well. I have not, this is me, answer your question. I have not seen the same level of scholarship and receipts brought from those other claims as I have the Igbo. Now, again, does it mean I'm right? No. I'm saying that for me has been the case, which is why I feel so strongly where the Igbo is concerned. I don't speak to the other ones as much because I personally haven't seen that level of detail that has been brought in terms of evidence.
What do you think the ramifications will be for Black and Jewish, Black and Israel, let's say Africa and Israel relations, solidarity, lack thereof, if that was true and more widely accepted?
It's funny. I think it would have some impact and then not at all on the other side. Meaning that similar to and for all my Beta Israel friends, my Ethiopian Israeli friends, I'm not trying to make them the same. I'm just using some parallels, if you will. the reason I referred to not just the Ethiopian Jews, but the Aliyah, maybe from the 1980s when they began to make Aliyah and the airlifts, they would come from Ethiopia to Israel, is that
Operation
even
Moses, right? Yeah.
right, Operation Moses, Operation Solid. As a matter of fact, even for those operations, one of my dear friends, Yafa, her dad is Baruch Tajeni. He passed away. He was one of the architects of that whole thing, right? Before that, it was before the airlifts. There are people who very bravely on the Israeli and the Ethiopian side were actually having these back channel conversations and stuff, right? So there are people, Israelis included, who didn't believe. Not all, but many of them didn't believe that these were real Jews, right? They don't know what's their claims, that and the other, even though they brought all the receipts in terms of the millennia that they've been keeping all these traditions and everything, right? I believe that something similar would happen where the evil was concerned. Not the exact same, similar in that there'll be plenty of people who still wouldn't believe it, even though it became accepted, right? And that it would have conversations around the slave. Once again, the whole Black Hebrew Israelite thing. Oh, the slaves who came were all Israelite. I don't believe in that sense, but what I do believe is that the Igbo who were taken, which are a large percentage, are, right? So then that's going to spur that conversation, which is actually already happening, right? The conversation about the Igbo who actually came to the Americas, those conversations have been going on for a long time. They've been happening kind of off the grid, but I believe what people are going to see here in the coming years is that they're going to become more and more in the forefront, right? They're going to actually be having the conversation, what it means. Now, most Igbo I know are actually Christian, right? So they're in terms of their faith, right? So that conversation is going to be thrown into the mix. Some are Orthodox in terms of their beliefs. They're not Christian and they keep a very more strict Jewish lifestyle and those types of things. So it's going to be I believe, a huge conversation that has a lot of ramifications. It's going to bring some clarity, some stuff, and I think it's going to cause some issues on a lot of other levels too.
Have people called you a Black Hebrew Israelite because of that position?
Every once in a while, get that, yeah, but not very much, right? Usually what people, if there's something on a negative thing, they'll just say that I'm a Jew, or that I'm trying to be a quote unquote Jew, whatever that means for them, right? So, but in terms of Black Hebrew Israelite, I've gotten not very much. That hasn't been very much of the claim.
So, even though from what I've looked at, with the Igbo, as of now, haven't been convinced. There's always more to learn. I'm not sort of in principle opposed to it, because I do hold the Limba are Semitic people.
Okay.
So down in South Africa and Zimbabwe. So it's not sort of like a principle of it or anything like that. It's just, I think the Limba have a much firmer or stronger case, basically, I guess I would say, from what I've seen in the various ways and stuff. And I know this is a controversy with Jewish Voice, with the Igbo, and then kind of going to the Limba later on and instead. But I do want people to also see that, people can work together, be brothers in the Lord, not agree about all these things, because what defines this is not really who we think's an Israelite or not. It's who we think Jesus is, who we think God is, and who we are in light of that. That's a most important thing.
Absolutely.
You today you said you would describe. Are you still considered a pastor, like ordained somewhere, or is it just that you preach, or a church? Or I thought you said at one point you still are.
I am. I was ordained in the 1990s by my bishop at the time, and so I am a pastor still. The church that we planted, which is called the Congregation of Zion, it's in Stockton, California. When we moved, we left the other pastors there in charge, so it's still there now. At some point, we will plant its sister congregation out here, but it could happen any time in the next year or so. And so, yeah, so I still serve as I'm an overseer, like a bishop of that congregation. We'll be planning one here and other parts of the country. So, yes, sir. So I'm still in that sense, pastor. Yes, sir.
Well, plant a congregation, you're going to be busier than ever.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. That's why we're trying to prayerfully see about the timing.
Yeah, it's taking on a lot there.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
No joke. Sunday worship or Saturday worship there?
Saturday. We've been Sabbath worshipers for my family for the last 30 plus years, and this was a journey for my wife and me. When our oldest children were little bitty kids, we began to keep the traditional Sabbath We observed the feast, we observed Passover, and tabernacles, all those things. We began to, as Christians, call it Hebrew roots Christians. Some people too use the term messianic. We don't usually use that term, but there's different generic terms that are used, and we began to be quote unquote Hebrew roots Christians probably back in the early 1990s.
All right. Well, maybe
Yes,
together
sir.
we sometime we can get together and talk more theology and whatnot. But I know this is about
Yes,
our
sir.
time limit. Orthodox Moore, an interesting friend of mine, he asks me my trepidation with the Igbo acceptance of the limba, and acceptance of the limba. Sorry, I didn't read the question right, but it's on the screen. Based upon the CMH vocab. Yes, partially. Maybe I would even say largely, but there are other factors. Now, I I I would be curious, Orthodox more what you thought, for example, what be interesting to see, and there's a lot to discuss about this, and it can be interesting, and I like it when people can do it without vitriol and all
Yes.
that. So shout out
Yes.
to you, Orthodox more. Thank you for the
Yeah.
question and all of that. Well,
And that is what we are going to attempt to do here, is have the conversation without vitriol. And shout out to Vocab for answering the question. And I will answer that question in return in terms of the Igbo extremely thoroughly in another video. I'm going to cover it in part here in terms of a larger thesis and whatnot. Because what was being said there, what was clarified there, was because a lot of people wonder, well, how can you accept the Lemba as being a Semitic people, but you reject other people in Africa and whatnot, right? And so, having watched and listened to Vocab for quite some time, it became kind of obvious to me that he's making that acceptance and rejection based upon the Cohen Modal Haplotype. And so, I'm also going to share my screen one more time and play a video I aired earlier, where Vocab had got on and broke down his views on the Cohen Modal Haplotype. So I'm going to play that video. I'm going to play, go over some parts of it, and we're going to go over the information that's in the video plus some other information after that, right quick. But yeah, shout out to Vocab for entertaining the question and whatnot. And I will definitely answer your questions as thoroughly as possible when time permits.
So the first paper I'm going to refer to that's based upon a study is from Nature, prestigious British journal there, volume 385, January 2nd, 1997. The title of this is Y Chromosomes of Jewish Priests by Michael F. Hammer. He's down there in Tucson, Arizona, which, poor Tucson, that's our second biggest city, but it's a sad, dusty town. Carl Skrorecki and Robert Bradman. They took 188 Jewish males, and they contributed genetic samples. They were from England, Israel, and North America. And then they were out also, if they were contributors, they were asked to describe their background, if they were a Cohen, Levi, or an Israelite. And from the analysis of this, they wanted to compare people who describes themselves or thought in some way based upon their last name, for example, like Cohen or Rappaport. They wanted to compare that to other people who were considered to be Jews, compare the non-Cohen with the Cohen. And here's what's fascinating from this first study I'm talking about. Two markers emerged. That's the study. That's it right there. Two markers emerged from analysis of the Y chromosome markers. The first thing was this thing called YAP negative. YAP negative. It stands for Y chromosome allele-polymorphism. It's an insert sequence. And since it's YAP negative, that title denotes the absence of it. So it does not have the Y chromosome allele-polymorphism insert sequence because it's YAP negative. The second was something that was a microsatellite repeat marker called DYS19. And here's what's fascinating. Out of 98.5, the Cohen, remember there's 188 for this particular sample size. 98.5 had YAP, which means which is a fascinating thing. And that's significantly lower than in non-Kohanim. Now, some of that sounds a little confusing. The point is, two things emerged that were different out of the Kohanim population from the larger Jewish population, and things that some had and then things that didn't have. But they weren't going to stop there, right? So more research had to be done. And so there's a second research paper that I'm going to point you to. It's from July 9th, 1998, Nature, volume 394. The title of this is Origins of Old Testament Priests. Origins of Old Testament Priests. This is by Mark Thomas. Again, this man, Carl Skrokrecki, Chaim Ben Ami, Tudor Parfit, familiar name, a lot of people know, Neil Bradman, and David B. Goldstein. And they found more information. Here's what they found in this. And this one, if you want to show this one on the screen as well, it's Origins of Old Testament Priests, Nature, volume 394, be from July 1998. Origins of Old Testament Priests, Nature, volume 394. You should be able to find an abstract of it there. You may have to put a little more information, like put Nature or July 1998, something like that. Let's see what pops up. Or maybe the name. If you put like David Goldstein, Tudor Parfit, I believe I see it. I believe I see it right there. It looks like you see it right there. Yeah, that's what it looks like.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
so
yeah,
from
okay.
that, here's what
There
they
we go.
found. And, you can look at these. We're showing you what they are. They found a particular array of 6 chromosomal markers. This particular array was in 97 of the 106 Kohanim tested. Now, this is important. I'm gonna stop here for a second to try to explain this. First of all, understand when we talk about the Cohen Modal Haplotype, sometimes people think, oh, that's like a gene. It's like the gene of Aaron. That's not what it is. It's a combination of neutral mutations that indicate a common lineage. Basically, it's not a Cohen gene. It's not the gene of Aaron. It's the Cohen genetic signature. And what's interesting about it is there are other Jews besides the Kohanim who have it, and Middle Eastern non-Jews who also carry it. So this is somewhat present in some Arab populations. So what does that show? This is really a marker of the ancient Hebrews. Most likely the marker of the shared patriarch. That's why this unique thing is in non-Jews who are of Arab descent as well, because they have a common patriarch.
I rarely pause videos to give commentary. I like to let people speak all the way through, make their points and whatnot, so they can't claim I'm cutting, etc. But I really need people to recognize what my man just said. He made the definitive claim that it's really a Hebrew mark. I'm going to talk about that, and it's like at one point, but I really want people to hear that. I'm going to want it just a bit so people can hear it.
Eastern non-Jews who also carry it. So this is somewhat present in some Arab populations. So what does that show? This is really a marker of the ancient Hebrews. Most likely the marker of the shared patriarch. That's why this unique thing is in non-Jews who are of Arab descent as well, because they have a common patriarch there. But it's preserved in higher percentages within Kohanim. And here's why. If you could show on the screen Exodus chapter 40, verse 15.
Yep.
Exodus 40, 15. And again, G-Con, anytime you want to interrupt or cut off, I know you'll be able to follow up. You got all kinds of stuff. But anytime you want to be like, let me add something, you can, G-Con. If you,
Yeah, for sure.
He's not muted or anything, is he? He's
Go ahead, brother.
okay.
He muted himself.
Okay, I got you. I'll read this while you're going there. I got the ESV up.
We go to 15.
Ex-
I'm about to switch it up right quick and move it to a different time stamp. Just want to get some specific points right quick, but y'all can see that one was one I really wanted y'all to hear right quick, because that's a very definitive claim. Very definitive claim.
Have these things, and it's not just them. There's another community that's interesting that I'm just learning about today. A much smaller community. Say what?
The Samaritans, Kohanim has it too.
Oh yeah. I'm glad you brought that up. Can you say a little more something about that? Because I feel like G-Con, I feel like the Samaritans get left out of the conversation a lot. I don't know if you have anything to say about that, but thank you so much for bringing that up.
Yeah. So what happens is when you look at the Samaritan among the Kohen, they realize that whatever group that they're in, whatever Jews that there is among the Kohen, the priests, they all have this marker, which is a J1C3 marker or J1, which they call. I think it comes from the J subclad. So then the Samaritans also have J1 and J2 markers. Now these markers originated outside of Africa. So then when you look at, like he said, the Buba tribe, and they have these markers, then you begin to see that they themselves, now it's not necessarily a Jew marker, but what it is it's a marker. I mean, it shows that they have close relationships, shared genetics with each other, real close, and it's been consistent, constant. So they can look at the rate between of this mutation that they see, and look at the mutation to say that this can date back, because they believe that it's constant. It can date back to a specific ancestor, the closest ancestor that they had. And so when they did the rate, like you said, it came all the way back to the times of when Aaron and them would have been looked at. And so that's how they're looking at these things. But a lot of these groups that are Jews have this marker, and this is an out of Africa marker. And one of the things that we look at, which we're going to talk about, but I'm going to let them finish, is that a lot of African Americans that say that they basically are Jews or Israelites don't have a lot of out of African markers, and when they do, they have European, like probably R1B or something like that, which European Jews have R1B2, but they also have autosomally traced back to the Middle Eastern and have mutations at a high level on their chromosomes. And so when you look at what he's saying here is that this is similar with a lot of other Jews. And so if you're saying you're an Israelite, we know geographically certain mutations picked up, certain haplogroups came along, subclads that's outside of Africa, that's in those areas where biblically Israelites would have came from. Why is it that you're saying that you're an Israelite and you're an African American, but you don't have those markers? You don't have none of those markers, and so that's what we're looking at, and what we want to get.
I'm not gonna run that back. I was about to, but my man in the chat's ears bleeding right quick, so I'm gonna save him from that one. But I am gonna make the point. So G-Con is saying that if you're claiming to be an Israelite, that you should have out of Africa markers and mutations in your DNA. And he's making the claim that we do not. That's something else I want people to pay attention to, because I'm gonna be picking up on this. I got this in notes, and I'll show you slides and all that type of stuff. But I want people to start putting that on the plate right now to start eating. You know what I'm saying?
To later on farther into some studies, especially about the Ashkenazis, but definitely there's many other groups that also have this marker just as well, J1C3 marker, and which they could name it as the Cohen marker, basically.
Yeah, and again, I'm glad you brought up the Samaritans, because a lot of times they get left out, and it's true they're mixed, if people want to say that, but I mean, everybody is, including the populations we're studying. To kind of.
And one more point I forgot to mention. So again, the other claim that was made there is that the Samaritan Kohanim also have the CMH or J1C3, etc. And so, if you're familiar with my channel, I played earlier in the week or last week, etc. A video explaining where that's incorrect and showing the information where that's incorrect, where the Samaritan Kohanim are 100% YAP positive. They're 100% E1B1B, etc. And so they don't carry J1C3. There's other people in their population that do, but they do not. The Kohanim do not. I'll be showing that going further. But again, those are major points that I want people to catch on to, right? For vocab, the marker of an Israelite is the CMH. G-Con is saying that the Samaritan Kohanim have the CMH, of which they don't. And G-Con is also stipulating that that African Americans should have these out of Africa markers, which he's claiming we do not have. Again, put that in the pipe of smoke for a second. Right?
Kind of put I'm going to go back to that study briefly, but to put a scholar's like response on it so people can kind of understand. He basically, because I like this scholar, Dr. Harry Oster, he's written a really good book on the topic as well. He has a quote about this, and he has a good book I'd recommend people get. It's called Legacy, A Genetic History of the Jewish People. It's on Oxford. It's a really important book to if you're really trying to get into this. And here's what he says. He's the chairman of the Human Genetics Program at New York University School of Medicine, by the way. Quote, recent work from genetics labs has validated the biblical record of a Semitic people who chose a Jewish way of life several thousand years ago. These observations are the biological equivalent to the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls, suggesting that despite 2,000 years of diaspora, the relatedness of the Jews of Eastern European, Ashkenazim, North African, Sephardim, and Middle Eastern, Oriental origin can be demonstrated by genetic marker analysis. It's an amazing thing. And just like G-Con said, this most recent common ancestor, who it looks like for all intents and purposes is Aaron, dates back as far as sort of the genetic clock that they can kind of use 3,300 years. That's the approximate time. And this is based upon the variation of the mutations among Kohanim today. And then they kind of look at the time frame, and it yields 106 generations away from the most recent common ancestor. That's 3,300 years. That's around the time of the Exodus. So there's somewhat of a margin of error here, but it's actually an interesting apologetic biblical proof, regardless of all this stuff with Hebrew Israelites and all that, because sometimes people are like, well, Moses didn't exist. And well, we have basically genetic evidence for Moses' brother and genetic evidence really ultimately for Abraham himself. Now they'll be like, oh, that's circumstantial, unless we can take a sample from Abraham. But the thing is, this is kind of how things like this work when you do this. You know, this is the way it is. And this has been a fascinating thing. And the reason why there's an explosion specifically in Jewish DNA is because of their tendency not to intermarry. Now, what happens is Jews intermarry at a greater rate when persecution is less. But throughout much of their history, persecution is greater. And so this is an important thing because you have sort of this isolated community that's traveling around the globe. There's not a whole lot of people groups that sort of have that shared type of history. It's a fascinating thing. Now, things are changing, and that's why you know, this research, it's almost like the perfect timing. Things are changing because, especially in the West, you know, Jews they intermarry. You know what I'm saying? But we can look, and it's a fascinating thing to look. There's other isolated communities that they do this with. The Jews aren't the only one. There's certain communities, and you could talk about them. But this is a very, very fascinating thing because it also has this oral tradition that's not just oral. You know, it's written at this point, a written history that actually corroborates this genetic evidence. It's almost unbelievable, and that's why a lot of the scholars who are involved in this, a lot of them are secular. I don't.
So a couple of things. One, shout out to vocab for even attempting to go through some genetic studies and apply it to his apologetics or whatnot, and trying to do so for a biblical proof. Because that was his last point there. People didn't catch it. He was saying that the CMH, the way he sees it, he's able to use that as a biblical apologetic to prove the Bible in some way, shape, or form. Because the dating that it goes back to, I'll show it here in a second because we'll be going through the studies. It goes back roughly to the time of the Exodus. And so he sees it as something that cooperates and tries to use it as, I can see why he holds on to it and uses it as the tool he uses it for. Like I said, I commend him for going through the studies because 9 out of 10 urban apologists will not go through those studies. We've seen that ourselves. Shout out to Damon Richardson and whatnot. But without further ado, family, I'm going to turn this off. I'm going to get into the presentation aspect of this team here. please like, share, and subscribe if you have not already. Here we go. Yeah, there we go. So, can DNA be used to prove the Bible? We definitely agree with that it can, and that's a definite big point of agreement that I definitely want to firmly build a foundation on of dialogue and whatnot. Like Vocab said, we're interesting friends. I do believe that's probably the one of the nicest compliments he's given me in public. He definitely, I've moderated like I think 6 of his debates or whatnot. We've gone back and forth over the years as what I would call like respectful scholastic rivals. We don't agree on a lot of things, and I think we actually agree on more than what he would think than what he understands or whatnot. But where we definitely differ like night and day, and but we can do so respectfully, and hopefully we can continue that with this dialogue here. So these are the views that I caught from Vocab and GCon in watching all that stuff. And please let me know if you see something to the contrary. I definitely don't want to mislabel somebody's beliefs or misconstrue somebody's beliefs or whatnot. And I'm human, you know what I'm saying? I can misunderstand what somebody's saying all day. So if you think I'm doing some injustice to what Vocab was talking about, hey, let me know what it is in the chat, and I'll do my best to correct it. You know what I'm saying? But with that, from what I could clearly hear, they're saying that the CMH is YAP negative and is Hebrew and likely Levitical on positive claims, right? Like it is Hebrew, like the YAP negative CMH is Hebrew and likely Levitical. What does that mean? That means that anything YAP positive cannot be Hebrew. Anything that's YAP positive cannot be Hebrew. What is YAP positive? We're going to get into that. The CMH is a proof for the Bible. That's another claim to make. Another claim that was made is that Samaritan Kohanim have the CMH. The claim was that Israelites should have out of Africa markers, i.e. something that's YAP negative. The Lemba have Semitic DNA and the Igbo don't. The Lemba have Semitic DNA and the Igbo don't. Now, this is also what I hear. Now, again, I'm not making the claim that I'm 100% correct. This is why I'm saying seen. This is what I hear. And Vocab, if I got you wrong, please let me know. But this is what I'm hearing, and let me know if this is what y'all hear. To me, it sounds like they seem to be taking the "you are what your father is" approach when it comes to Y DNA. And on with that, it seems like they reject that sojourners may have different Y DNA than tribal Israelites. Trying to relegate who is and is not an Israelite based upon their Y DNA. That's something that's not what the camps would do, but that's the same methodology, which is you are what your father is, right? And so if they disagree with your parental lineage, you cannot be an Israelite. Now, Vocab did mention that they're sojourners or whatnot. And he understands the concept of that sojourners and tribal Israelites aren't going to look the same phenotypically based upon intermixture around the world or whatnot. But somehow he doesn't seem to be acknowledging that those sojourners are going to have different DNA, right? And so to say when you say that the Igbo, you don't believe the Igbo are Israelites based upon the fact they don't have the CMH, well, that completely goes against the sojourner concept. You have to come up with a reason as to why you don't believe that they were ever sojourners. Particularly when we don't have any patriarchal DNA. Particularly when we don't have that. Also, they don't seem to be familiar with the science on Samaritan DNA. I'll be able to clearly show within studies where it breaks down that they are not J1C3 and they are emphatically YAP positive. They are EM78. E1B1B. They don't seem to be familiar with the science on YAP positive origins. And I'll definitely be touching on this because the origin of YAP plus is outside of Africa. That's what the majority of the science points to on this. And it's an outside of African origin in terms of the mutation. So trying to say that and on top of that, it's very present in the Levant. Very, very present in the Levant. In fact, based upon a lot of scientific papers that we looked at, we make the claim that it is very comfortable to look at YAP positive or to look at E1B1B, for instance, in the Levant, amongst the Natufians, etc., as a proto-Semitic group of people. Also, they don't seem to be familiar with the science on sub-Saharan African DNA within modern Jewish populations. They don't seem to be familiar with the science about this and when that intermixture took place or could have taken place. And lastly, they don't seem to be familiar with the science on Levantine DNA within sub-Saharan Africa. Now, I'm not trying to throw any dirt on them or none of that type of stuff. Like I said, I commend vocab for even going through the 2 studies that he showed the people in that live stream or whatnot, because most urban apologists will not do such. And when presented with said information, they will head for the hills. Man. They will head for the hills. Matter of fact, I know y'all remember this. The man Damon Richardson came out, was making all kind of bold claims, and he was backing up he was bolstering this whole EM2 isolation myth and the concept to where like we've only ever been in West Africa and whatnot. And so he was clamoring for peer-reviewed sources, etc. whatnot. And when given such, he headed for the hills like you wouldn't believe. It was exit stage right for him. He burnt rubber like you wouldn't believe. The smoke trail was crazy. The smoke trail was crazy. So something I definitely want to get to, points of agreement. We agree that phenotype is fluid and color does not determine lineage. I think that is a big point of agreement that we can lay down as a foundation for our conversations on this. Right? And I think this is very important for people to understand going forward. The YAP gang is not making phenotype-based arguments. This is one of the major reasons why you shouldn't lump us up with the Hebrew Israelite camps and whatnot, or the moderate, so-called moderates and whatnot. It's not happening. We also agree that genetics can be used as a proof for the Bible. We literally have a whole model that does its best to prove out the table of nations, etc. On top of that, there's another model that I'll be showing you here. I'm going forward in this presentation. Points of disagreement. If vocab truly does appreciate our work, then he should stop identifying YAP gang as Hebrew Israelites and remove YAP gang from his list of Hebrew Israelites. We have clearly shown we don't fit any of his 6 criteria for being a Hebrew Israelite. We've clearly shown such. And any information that vocab has to the contrary, I will 100% be willing to go through live on air to clarify anything. But I want to go into some basic positions that vocab has had for quite some time and get into why he holds such positions. Right? So this is vocab's very, 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 very first book, Barack Obama versus the Black Hebrew Israelites. This is his first book on apologetics, where it's an introductory breakdown on what he believes is the history and beliefs of One West Hebrew Israelism and whatnot. And I appreciate that he specifies he's talking about One West Hebrew Israelites in this particular book. in this, he stipulates some very interesting stuff. So one, he believes that Hebrew Israelite is a contentious phrase for multiple reasons, but also here's one of them. He says, I typically use Hebrew Israelites and almost always in quotation marks. Why? There are no compelling reasons to believe that most self-identified Hebrew Israelites are truly Hebrew or Israelite, ethnically, nationally, or religiously. Big claims right there. Okay? There's no compelling reasons to believe that most self-identified Hebrew Israelites are truly Hebrew. That's a huge group of people right there. Or Israelite. That's a more specific group of people. But he's saying that there's no compelling reason to believe that African Americans, etc., or people who are Hebrew Israelites, which is even a big bolder claim here, because in the One West doctrine that covers blacks, Latinos, and Native Americans and whatnot. And yeah, trying to disprove the Sephardic and Maghrebi contribution to the American Latino community is going to be very hard to disprove. The genetics are there, and the effect in that population is there, and it's already moving. But again, not such ethnically, nationally, or religiously. That's a big claim. Vocab does not believe in African American, Hebrew, or Israelite ethnic claims. What reason does vocab use in order to reject the Hebrew and Israelite ethnic claims of African Americans? The Cohen Modal Haplotype. Vocab alone says the CMH is Hebrew and likely Levitical. The YAP gang model. So in that table of nations model I was talking about, we have a 3-pair group haplogroup tree or phylogenetic tree that we use to come down, break down the table of nations and whatnot, based upon the 3 sons of Noah, Ham, Shem, and Japheth. And based upon our model, Ham is AB, which is also YAP negative. Shem is DE, which is YAP positive. And Japheth is CF, which is YAP negative. So in the model that vocab uses, Shem would be CF. I don't know who anyone else would be, but for what he's saying, based upon the Cohen Modal Haplotype, Shem would be CF. And so what you see here is that there's 2 groups here. There is a YAP positive group, and there are 2 YAP negative groups. There's 2 sets of people, two sets of groups. I'll say it like that: a YAP positive group and a YAP negative group. So AB and CF are both YAP negative. DE is the only YAP positive set of haplotypes on haplogroups on. This is also the YAP model. To be clear, we have never claimed that E1B1A is the Israelite haplogroup. Some other Israelite groups that deal with information, pseudo DNA information, etc., like vocab was talking about, whom he also talked about, we disagree with, they'll make this positive claim and whatnot. You can't make that positive claim until you get the DNA samples of a patriarch. However, we believe Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob would have been a subclade of DE, and we leave it right there. Different people in YAP have different beliefs on what Abraham could have been, for instance, or whatnot. But the one thing we agree on, the one thing we teach in public, is the fact that we believe that because of our 3-pair group model, Shem being DE, that Abraham would have been a subclade thereof. That's as far as we go with it, because that's as far as the information can point to in terms of what you can use to build a model. Now, this is intriguing. I can see why there's some trepidation with dealing with the YAP model head up from a lot of urban apologists and whatnot, because if you walk it out, the YAP model puts the majority of African American men in Shem's lineage. not necessarily an Israelite lineage, but it puts the vast majority of African American men in Shem's lineage. The vast majority of African American men are YAP positive. Up to 75% of African American males are carriers of YAP positive lineages. So there's been about there's no compelling reason to believe that they could be Hebrew. That one should be off the table. There's a lot of compelling evidence to believe there's Hebrew connections all throughout West Africa. There's a lot of compelling evidence to believe genetically, if you're YAP positive, you could be Hebrew. And you could be within the lineage of Shem. Now, taking it a step further and saying it's definitely like an Israelite thing, no. You can't do that. And even what I'm doing in terms of saying you could be Hebrew, that's all speculation and whatnot, right? But you can't close the door on it based upon the arguments we have for the YAP positive. Oh, give me just 2 seconds. Yeah, give me 2 more seconds. Sorry about that, man. Also, as you can see, the YAP Gang Wives of Ham, Shem, and Jacob model is coming soon. That is a very important part of what we're trying to do going forward to try to make this table of nations real for everybody. When talking about Hebrew Israelites or whatnot, there tends to be like a really masculine and chauvinist approach to the thing to where it's very male-centered and all kinds of stuff, right? But one important thing that can be done with this model is it's not just for the men. The women can find out how they connect to the table of nations too. So please stay tuned for the YAP Gang Wives, Ham, Shem, and Jacob model. Coming to you soon. So the Levitical model, being that the CMH has a biblical proof because it goes back to 3,300 years before president. I respect the concept, and I definitely respect it because I myself was somebody who's trying to prove the Exodus, etc. So I definitely respect that concept. But what also needs to be understood is this concept of the mixed multitude and what that looks like and what that genetic imprint looks like in reality. Because, like I said, it seems like the reality of foreign haplogroups coming into the nation of Israel is going to change the fingerprint of what it looks like, just besides having national or tribal Israel's haplogroup there. So you could have Abraham's haplogroup all day throughout Israel, but you have to acknowledge that there's going to be other haplogroups coming in as sojourners. Now, this is the other model I'm talking about here, and why I respect the concept of trying to prove the Bible with DNA. One, we have the Table of the Nations model. Yes, 100%, right? But something we've also been working on is this mixed multitude model. And why is this model important? Because the African admixture within modern Jewish populations and within modern Middle Eastern populations like Vocab was talking about is also a biblical proof. How so? because just like when you look at the range of the CMH of where it can go back to, the far end on that range is 3,300 years before present. The same thing with the African admixture within modern Jewish populations and whatnot. Like if you go to the far end of that range, it can go to 3,400 years before present. Again, we're talking about the time period of the Exodus. It's actually closer than the CMH, if you want to get technical. So again, this is very important. African admixture within, and again, not just African admixture, because within the apologetics community, you're seeing a lot of North Africa being pushed as just Africa. I'm not tripping on that. We appreciate you bringing North Africa back to Africa and whatnot. However, this is sub-Saharan African DNA. That's within modern Jewish populations. 3 to 5%, up to 15% Middle Eastern populations. And this admixture, the autosomes are consistent with sub-Saharan Africans of Luya from Kenya all the way to the Yoruba of Nigeria. This sub-Saharan African admixture is also, like, again, it's also it's not just a biblical proof. It's almost even better than the CMH, and I'll tell you why. The CMH, well, you know what? Let me go into the paperwork before I do this part. Don't let me jump the gun, but I will come back to this part. Bottom line is there's two methods we're comparing here. And people should understand this mixed multitude concept, because this mixed multitude concept is what we brought to Damon Richardson that he ran from. I'm not going to be saying any different information here tonight than what we brought to Damon Richardson. And he ran months ago. But I want everyone within the sound of my voice to hear this. The admixture of sub-Saharan African DNA within the nation of Israel at its founding of a nation during the Exodus, etc., can be used as a potential biblical proof of the Bible. For a little bit of levity, the mixed multitude was largely an E and J haplogroup block party. Y'all hear me talk about this E and J block party all day. Both have ties to the Levant and Semitic populations. Both of them have ties to such, right? However, the mixed multitude was large, even though it was largely an EJ haplogroup block party, it was not just E and J. You also had R there, T there, and other haplogroups that were also there. All have ties to Levantine and Semitic populations. That needs to be understood. I need a timestamp, so I need to go over that. But this is the first paper that you know what, this is why I brought it up. This is the first paper that Vocab was talking about. And I want y'all to focus on this name here, because he mentioned it by name, Michael F. Hammer. Michael F. Hammer is a very important individual because he brings out a lot, if not the majority, of DNA tests that have to do with the Jewish populations and whatnot. On top of that, Michael F. Hammer is the one who brought out the genetic studies on YAP positive as well. So this man right here, he also brought out the studies on what established, again, the CMH, what the Cohen Modal Haplotype was, right? So that's what we're about to go through here, etc., whatnot. But he brought up the studies that established the CMH and the studies that established YAP positive. The studies that established YAP CMH and the studies that established YAP positive. So very important individual right here. And it's going to become extremely obvious that they're not reading all of his stuff. And they're not reading all, like, the plethora of topics that he gets into. But again, according to the biblical accounts, the Jewish priesthood was established about 3,300 years ago with the appointment of the first Israelite high priest. Designation of Jewish males to the priesthood continues to this day and is determined by strict patrilineal descent. Accordingly, we sought and found clear differences in the frequency of Y chromosome haplotypes between Jewish priests and their lay counterparts. Remarkably, the difference is observable in both Ashkenazi and Sephardic populations, despite the geographical separation of the two communities. This is something that I want people to really focus on real quick. The establishment of the CMH was in particularly done within Ashkenazi and Sephardic populations within 3 spots on the globe. They were even hyper focusing on the connection between the two and what differences they had between the two. So it's not just a CMH study. It's also like a Sephardic and Ashkenazi Jewish DNA study all at the same time. And that needs to be understood. And I'll explain why here in a second. Going forward in the same paper. The phenotypic differences that exist between different communities of contemporary Jews in the world are thought to emanate, at least in part, from genetic admixture with the neighboring communities of non-Jews during prolonged dispersion. We 100% agree on that. 1,000,000% agree on that. Phenotype is fluid in its piece. And if it is fluid, well, I'll leave that alone for right now. But I'm gonna jump down just a little bit. Identification as priest carries within it with it certain social and religious obligations, which have tended to preserve this identity within Jewish communities. Based on surveys of Jewish cemetery gravestones, priests represent approximately 5% of the estimated total male world Jewish population of roughly 7 million. So based on gravestones, they're getting that number, right? We identified of 188 unrelated Y chromosomes using the polymerase chain reaction PCR applied to genomic DNA isolated from mucosal swab from Israeli, North American, and British Jews. So this was the 3 groups that they used: Israeli, North American, and you'll see that the North American is Canadian, and British Jews. We constructed haplotypes using first the presence of or absence of the Y-ALU polymorphic YAP insert. Now, but this is what I appreciate about this is because they break down what YAP is. Thought to represent a unique evolutionary event dated between 29,000 and 340,000 years ago. So that's the range for when the YAP insert gets introduced and whatnot. From 29,000 to 340,000 years ago. And if you're young Earth, I understand that it doesn't work within your timelines, but you know how to make that work within your timelines. Going forward. So they were talking, this is the signatures that vocab was talking about, the 6 signatures he was talking about, 6 haplotypes, etc. Right? Distinguishing priests from the lay population, etc. The most striking difference was in the frequency of YAP positive chromosomes among compared to lay Jews. Only 1.5% of Y chromosomes among priests were YAP positive, in comparison to a frequency of 18.4% in lay Jews. So in the testing that they did, it wasn't that none of the priests came up, none of the Kohanim came up YAP positive. 1.5% did. So someone's gonna be like, so what? The Kohanim were it's only 1.5% YAP positive. That's nothing. That's a drop in the bucket. And they only make 18% of the population. That's nothing. Well, this is 1.5% within these 3 groups that were tested in Israel, or of the Israeli Jews, the Canadian Jews, and also the British Jews, who are of, like, again, they're looking for Ashkenazi and Sephardic backgrounds, right? So this is 1.5% amongst their populations. And also when you go into their populations, the largest individual population of haplogroups, the largest 2 are J and E. Like, for instance, within the Ashkenazi population, there is no majority, or there is no There is no haplogroup that takes up more than 50% of the population and whatnot. They're all sub 50% of the population and whatnot. So 18% isn't like, it doesn't seem large to you and I, but in a mixed multitude, 18% is pretty large. And it's again, it represents the second largest grouping of haplogroups within the mixed multitude of the Jewish diaspora. So again, 1.5% in this Sephardic Ashkenazi kind of focused comparison and whatnot, and 18% within the late Jew population. Keep that in mind. Again, we further identified subjects as being of Ashkenazi or Sephardic origin, etc. This was very heavily focused on those two populations. This wasn't something that was determined amongst the Kohanim, amongst all world Jewry, and that needs to be understood. The CMH, again, one more time, the CMH was not determined amongst testing all of the Kohanim from all of world Jewry. These are the tables for the study, etc. And you can see right there the YAP positive is 1.5%. Again, Ashkenazic Jewish communities of Northern Europe, Sephardic Jewish communities of North Africa and the Middle East, Kohen priest, Israelite, lay Jew, and etc. Right? These, again, this is not Kohanim from all of world Jewry. One more time, Michael F. Hammer is the author. I want that to stick in people's brains. Another study that was mentioned was the origins of Old Testament priests. And this is also an interesting study to get into. Let's see. It corroborates the same concept. Here we show that all the Levite Y chromosomes are diverse. Cohen chromosomes are homogeneous. We trace the origin of Cohen chromosomes to about 3,000 years before present, early during the Temple period. Now, this is in relation to the previous study I just talked about, right? Now, this is another study that they did, where it says we characterize Y chromosome specific variations at 6 micro. Like, these are the same stuff that Wokat was talking about. So, like when they were identifying the CMH, there's 6 basic markers that they're looking at, right? And again, they corroborate that these people were taken from Israel, Canada, and the United Kingdom. So again, Israeli populations, North American populations, and the United Kingdom, or the British populations. And then again, you see the emphasis on Ashkenazic and Sephardic Jews, or Kohanim, etc. Now, this part's also interesting. In the same paper, it says gene flow from the Kohanim could account for the presence of the Cohen Modal Haplotype in both Ashkenazic and Sephardic Israelites, or it could be a signature of the ancient Hebrew population. That right there, that last part, it could be a signature of the ancient Hebrew population, right? That right there is saying something completely different than this is Aaron's DNA, right? So this is something that I point to. I believe that the methodology that they used here in trying to take a group of people and figure out what DNA they had in common and how far back it went back in time, I think it's a fantastic method. It's a fantastic method because what you can do with that, absent of having a patriarchal set of DNA or whatnot, absent of having the body of a patriarch like Abraham, Isaac, or Jacob or whatnot, the best you can do is try to figure out, does this population go back to the mixed multitude? And this is how you do it. You take the DNA, you take the like haplogroups, etc., whatnot, and you figure out within the mutations that are within those haplogroups, etc., how far back they go, etc., and what in terms of the ones they have in common. And do those mutations go back to at least the time period of the Exodus? Again, this Hebrew population, etc. Anyway, the Cohen Modal Haplotype may therefore be useful for testing for a testing hypothesis regarding the relationship between specific contemporary communities and the ancient Hebrew population. That's exactly what I'm talking about. It's fantastic for determining if people are part of the mixed multitude, 100%. The only problem was it's only so far been applied to haplogroup J. The same level of testing has not been applied to the other haplogroups within the diaspora of world Jewry. And in particular has not been done with the second biggest haplogroup, which is haplogroup E. And again, based upon their confidence intervals, etc., and how they do their measuring, their dating and whatnot, and the range for which they get for the generations and all that type of stuff. Again, they're saying that they believe the CMH can go back from 2100 to basically 3,300 years ago and whatnot. No issue with that. It's fantastic. It's just only being applied to haplogroup J here. And without, again, absent of patriarchal DNA, for one, unless you got the Y DNA of one of the patriarchs, it's not happening, fam. You can't just definitively claim this is Hebrew and Levitical, etc. whatnot. You can say the best you can say is it most likely goes back to the time period of the Exodus and the mixed multitude. And you can even talk about like the size of the population and whatnot, right? Okay, I believe that they're Kohanim because they're a bigger portion of the population. That's an argument you can make. That's not one I would make, and I'll show you why. Again, the CMH was determined by testing Israeli, British, and North American Jewish populations, and was not determined from sampling all of world Jewry, as there was a heavy emphasis on identifying Ashkenazim and Sephardim. Hold on, fam. Sorry, I thought somebody was sending me a message right quick. They're just going, there's the having fun in the back chat. Shout out to the fam. So where else? Yeah. Also, there was a heavy emphasis on identifying Ashkenazim and Sephardim within these studies and whatnot. Right. That needs to be very well understood. The CMH testing also found that in these Ashkenazi and Sephardic populations of Israel, North America, and the UK, that 1.5% of Kohanim were in fact YAP positive and made up 18.4% of lay Jews. Or excuse me, 18.4% of lay Jews were also YAP positive. Now, let's go into another study that they did not go into. And this is one that I brought up in a video where I was addressing what G-Con has said about the Samaritan Jews, the Samaritan Kohanim, excuse me, having the CMH or J1C3, as he said it. But here's a paper that completely explains the situation. Reconstruction of patrilineages and matrilineages of Samaritans and other Israeli populations from Y chromosome and mitochondrial DNA sequence variation. So for sake of time, because I am making this kind of long, I'm just going to jump to the highlighted parts and whatnot, but y'all can definitely slow it up and read what's on the screen, etc. Principal component analysis suggests the common ancestry of Samaritan and Jewish patrilineages. Most of the former may be tracked back to a common ancestor in the paternally inherited Jewish high priesthood, Kohanim, at the time of the Assyrian conquest of the Kingdom of Israel. Again, I'm not going to read the whole thing, so you can definitely pause it up and read the whole thing yourself. But according to their tradition, they are the descendants of the ancient tribes of Manasseh and Ephraim, sons of Joseph, and Levitical priests from Shechem. They claim to be the remnants of the 10 lost tribes of Israel that remained in the Kingdom of Israel after the Assyrian conquest of 1722 to 1721 BCE. Of the 12 Samaritan males, 10 of them, 83%, belong to haplogroup J, which captures 3 of the 4 Samaritan families. The family Joshua Marhiv belongs to subhaplogroup J1, while families Danfi and Sadaka belong to the subhaplogroup J2 and can be further distinguished by M67, the derived allele of which has been found in the Danfi family. The paternal ancestry of Ethiopian Jews resembles that of Africans, with 7 out of 17, 41.2%, belonging to haplogroup A3B2, and 17.6%, belonging to haplogroup E3B1, defined by EM78. Was also found in all 9 populations at frequencies of 10 to 16.7%. The Samaritan family Cohen carries this haplotype. One more time. Defined by M78. EM78. The Samaritan Cohen family Cohen carries this haplotype. Haplogroup E3B3, defined by EM123, was present at 5 to 20% in Ethiopian, Ashkenazi, Libyan, and Yemenite Jews, and in Palestinians. So it's saying here that 83% of the population, the majority of the population, haplogroup J amongst the Samaritans. But it's saying that the Cohen family are 100% YAP positive, and that they're EM78, E1B1B. On top of that, it's saying that when you go into other populations, again, so the CMH was just looked at in terms of the 3 populations I talked about, focusing on the Ashkenazi and Sephardim and whatnot, right? But here it's talking about when you go into Ethiopian, Ashkenazi, Libyan, which is North African, right, and Yemenite populations, and also in Palestine, you're seeing a particular form of E1B1B, EM123. This is something that for instance, Dante Fortson has a subclade of, right? That they carry this haplogroup up to 20% in these populations. Again, we're seeing this same, you know what I'm saying, 17, 18, 20%, because here it's 17%. If 83% are haplogroup J, 17% are haplogroup E1B1B. So look at this dichotomy here, family. Look at this dichotomy here, family. Again, 83% of the population, the vast majority of the population of the Samaritans are haplogroup J. But they're Kohanim, which is a minority of the population, 17%, roughly that same size as the amount of people who are YAP positive in the Ashkenazi and Sephardic populations. Roughly the same size, right? They're the minority, but they make up 100% of the Kohanim. So in the Ashkenazi population, they're 1.5% of the Kohanim. In the Mizrahi populations, the people who stayed in the Middle East, for instance, right, amongst the Samaritans, they're 100% of the Kohanim. Think about that. Very similar sized populations amongst the Ashkenazi and Sephardim. Amongst the lay Jews, 18.4% are YAP positive, and 1.5% are the Kohanim. Amongst the Samaritan and Mizrahi Jews, never left. They're talking about they've been there since the Assyrian conquest, etc. Whatnot, right? 17%, same size, right? 17% are YAP positive, but yet they make up 100% of the Kohanim. 100% of the Kohanim. And like I said, this is Dante Fortson's haplogroup. In terms of being E1B1B, he's not EM78, he's a downstream EM123. But that one itself is also important to understand because that one's linked to the Natufians, which again, YAP talks about being the proto-Semitic Semites and whatnot. Avery got a fantastic video on this. Please go check it out on his page. When I have time, I will definitely link it down below. Now, what's interesting about this is Abu has something to say about this because he was looking at this and was recognizing, okay, I told Dante that he was E1B1B. It became a thing that he was like, oh, wow, like I am the receipt. I got a whole different DNA. Yeah. And it links up to Natufi and stuff and whatnot, right? That became a real serious conversation and whatnot. And what's interesting about it is Abu's out here agreeing with the YAP game. He says if I had to choose between J and E in terms of which one's most likely going to be the haplogroup of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, he says he has to go with haplogroup E. That's Vocab's man too. Shout out to Abu, you know what I'm saying? My CIA compadre, you know what I'm saying? But again, Abu keeps it fair. He's not gonna he goes with the methodology and whatnot. Abu started going through YAP information, started going through a lot of the genetic stuff, went through more information than what I've seen Vocab go through. And when he looked at it, he was like, you know what? If I gotta, and I said it publicly, if I gotta choose between one or the other, I'm gonna choose E. So here's something I definitely want to point to and put on the table. It should be easy to agree that it's an unjustified position to claim that E1B1A is the Israelite haplogroup. It should be an easy thing to agree on that, right? It should be equally as easy to agree that excluding E1B1A from the mixed multitude of Israel is also unjustified. Is also unjustified. So when I'm hearing people say that you can't be an Israelite based upon you not being haplogroup J or whatnot, again, I'm hearing the whole mixed multitude concept get thrown under the bus. That's not the Bible. That's not the Bible, fam. Something else I want to correct the record on, right? So just in case people don't think that E1B1A are within Jewish populations, let's clear this up right here and right now. Ashkenazi Jews carry E1B1A in small amounts. Sephardic Jews carry E1B1A in small amounts. Ethiopian Jews carry E1B1A. Lemba Jews carry E1B1A. Igbo Jews carry E1B1A. And to be clear, I take a very similar position to Remy Alona on this. When we talked, he was saying I had the pleasure of interviewing him, even though we disagree on certain stuff. I do agree with some of his research on Omanana, and I do believe that's a very important thing to get researched. I disagree with how he sees a lot of stuff on DNA. However, something he did say that I agree with 100% is he does not believe that all Igbos have the same lineage or whatnot. Like Vocab was talking about them being 40 million strong, etc. What you see amongst them is that they have different haplotypes and haplogroups, etc. Even though they're majoritively E1, they're like 90% like E1B1A, right? They have different forms of E1B1A amongst them. And they also have other haplogroups that are in minority groups that are not E1B1A, which is why they're only 90%. But you can't rule that out. The African diaspora in the Americas, like Israel in the Bible, are a mixed multitude unto themselves, carrying multiple haplogroups and subclades thereof. I want you to take a really good look at that, fam. This is how diverse we are. This is the full African diaspora in the Americas, going from North America to Brazil or whatnot, including the Caribbean, etc. Talking EM2, EM191, EM154. All of those are E1B1B. EM35, EM123, EM81, EM78. All of that is E1B1B. EM34, EM44. That's me. That's E1A. EM75. That's E2. That's something that we find from East Africa. This is a clade that we know when we find this marker. These people came from East Africa, part of the 540,000 that came from East Africa, etc. Right? Haplogroup A0, A1A, BM60, TM70, R1BV88, R1B2M69, R1A 448, GM201, IM70, KM9, J1. Yes, we even have J in our populations. J1, M267, J2, M172. We even have we have African Americans, we have Native American haplotypes. QM240, 242. We're not just one thing. We're very diverse, fam. We are a mixed multitude unto ourselves. And this mixed multitude needs to be slowed down and understood, and can't and should not ever be pigeonholed and painted with the broad brush of you can't be this, you have to be this, etc. No, this is very diverse, fam, and needs to be understood as such. Michael F. Hammer, again, you're going to hear me mention him quite a bit. In a 2009 study, identified 21 different Y chromosomes from Kohanim of diverse backgrounds. And again, I'm just going to mention the first two there, right? We see that the first two I got up there are EM78 and EM123. These are both YAP positive haplotypes. We saw that the EM78 is amongst the Samaritan Jews, amongst the Samaritan Kohanim, excuse me. And again, we see that EM123 was in, again, when we're talking about world Jewry, they were within Ashkenazi Jewry, they were in Maghrebi Jewry. It's also within Sephardi Jewry. It's also within Mizrahi Jewry. It was in Ethiopian Jewry. It was in Yemenite Jewry. Up to 20% in each population. So is there a lot of J haplogroups? Yes, 100%. 100%. You can see 7 right there, right? 7 to 2. Got you all day. But the two biggest groups in terms of percentage amongst the Kohanim are haplogroup J and haplogroup E. But you see the diversity, fam. So again, Michael F. Hammer brought out the CMH and the YAP plus studies. And what's interesting about this is Michael F. Hammer himself thinks that YAP plus most likely originates in Asia, not Africa. This goes to the point of what G-Con was talking about, right? Where he was like, well, Israelites don't have any out of Africa markers or whatnot. And he said when they have one, it's typically because they have some R1b. No, YAP isn't R1b, fam. R1b is YAP negative. But YAP is a whole outside of Africa mutation. I already touched on that. Don't need to touch on that again. The methodology of the CMA should also be applied to the other haplotypes among the priestly class of world Jewry in order to identify the most likely haplotypes of the mixed multitude. Definitely touched on that. And again, I can't touch on this point enough that if you want to use the CMH as a biblical proof, you can't deny the African admixture methodology and the model itself. Because all world, like the modern world Jewish populations cannot run from this 3 to 5% ancient admixture they have. It's there. And it's at that same time period of the Exodus. Same. Without the DNA of a biblical patriarch, identifying the DNA of the mixed multitude is one of the best proofs we can use to map migrations of Jewish communities throughout history. This is why we started putting together the mixed multitude model, because it's the best you can do without having a biblical patriarch. And the CMH does not give you a biblical patriarch. It gives you a possible patriarch, and it puts you in the right place at the right time. That's the best it can do, is it can put you in the right place at the right time until we have some patriarchal DNA. Again, YAP plus most likely origin in Asia and not Africa. Evidence for a possible Asian origin of YAP plus Y chromosomes. by none other than Michael F. Hammer from the same time period as the paper I was reading about the CMH. And you can see here other studies that Hammer was doing in 1996 about the same stuff as well. The non-recombining portion of the human Y chromosome has become an important tool for evolutionary studies. Breaking that down there. Hold on, right quick. There's a few things I want to jump into this because this was actually a really interesting study because just like they were going through like 6 different markers to where they could identify the CMH or whatnot. They did the same thing here with 3 different gap markers and whatnot. It's actually really interesting study. This is one that I'm going to go through a lot more thoroughly when I have a little bit more time because I'm already going deep on this one time. Lulling people to sleep and whatnot. But this is an extremely interesting study to go into, etc. So one of the most useful and widely studied Y-linked polymorphisms is known as the Y-allele polymorphic YAP element. I'll see my man in the chat asking me to explain polymorphism and whatnot, polymorphic, etc. I will do so on a different stream. This stream, I'm trying to just keep it to a couple of simple things right quick. And the one thing I want people to understand just real quick on this one is understanding that there is just a significant, there's just a difference into what the YAP positive and YAP negative are, right? Or that there is a difference, right? We'll get into what the difference is because basically we're just talking about protein synthesis, etc. Right? It gets into a lot of like deep in the weeds stuff that's gonna like lull people to sleep and whatnot, right? But what people need to understand is that the CMH is YAP negative, and that there's an argument for YAP positive cohesions as well, and that if you're YAP negative, well, I'll just leave it there. Like, so there's 2 different groups and whatnot. There's a CMH, which is YAP negative, and there's cohenes, which are also YAP positive. However, Hammer in 1997 have raised the possibility that YAP haplotype 3 originated in Asia and migrated to Africa. Again, there was a handful of haplotypes they were looking at and mutations thereof, etc. And they were numbering them out from 3 to 5, etc. whatnot. And they found out that 3, which came first in their order, in origin and whatnot, they believe it to originate in Asia, and then migrated to Africa. So they're saying that this particular haplotype is an out of Africa marker. That's for you, G-Con. And they're saying because YAP haplotypes 4 and 5 evolved from haplotype 3 and account for the majority of Y chromosomes in Africa, the hypothesis implies that a substantial Asian contribution to the African paternal gene pool. This is Hammer study saying such, right? So again, the same brother. These are the tables that go through it and whatnot, breaking down the trees and the origin, etc. And there's 3 different explanations they gave for what they believe could have been the case for the breakdown, right? And for sake of time, I'm gonna let y'all pause that up and look at it yourself right quick. I've been talking for a second, so I'm gonna jump through this right quick. But you can see to where 2 origins were in Asia and 1 origin was in Africa, the way they're gonna look at the hypothesis and whatnot. But even out of the hypothesis list, the majority of the hypotheses are an Asian origin hypothesis. In summary, the ancestral states associated with polymorphisms that originated just before and after the YAP insertion into the Y haplogroup tree are currently found in Asia and not in African populations. Again, G-Con, that is for you, my G. So this is haplogroup E, right? And that DE right there, that's YAP Majid, right? The DE floating right there on top of Saudi Arabia, right? That's YAP Majid, right? And we're seeing the migrations of DE into and the subclade of DE into going into Africa, etc. Right? Now here is haplogroup D. This is the subclade of DE as well. So from the major paragroup DE, you get the subclades of D and the subclades of E. This is D. You see D all the way out in all the way up through Asia, right? All the way up through Asia, from Tibet to Japan. And when you put them together and whatnot, this is what they look like. This is the YAP range, fam. This is the YAP range, fam. And what's even more interesting about this is if you want to look at it linguistically, whatnot, right? Because something we talk about is that Semitic in many scientific papers will mean Semitic speaking people. It doesn't mean, it normally does not mean that someone is a descendant of Shem. Just like when they say that if someone's a Canaanite in the paper, they don't necessarily mean that someone's a descendant of Canaan. They mean that they lived in the area of Canaan. So when someone says Semitic in these papers, they're talking about Semitic speaking peoples more often than not. And so when you look at the range of Semitic speaking peoples, you also get this. You can see where Semitic languages are all throughout Africa. Central and West Africa at that, right? Like, so again, Mali's West Africa. I hate to break it to people, like Mauritania, that's all, like Senegal is right there, fam. That's all sub-Saharan Africa right there. Nigeria, Chad, like, you can see the imprint of the Semitic language. It stands to reason that there's people who brought these languages as well, right? People, trade, all that type of stuff, right? And not only that, they brought their DNA, bro. They brought their DNA. And again, this is where we get this concept of the Tufians being proto-Semites, right? The scientific papers we go to talking about this, they deal with language and such, right? But on top of that, their DNA was E1B1B. They were YAP positive. Now, what's interesting about this is Vocab came on my show and is now admitted, this is his quote. This isn't me saying, this is him, that some Semitic DNA came to the Americas via the transatlantic slave trade. Not much. To him, he says it's minuscule, right? But some of it's there. So now what's interesting to me is I would love for him to clear this up because as I understand it, he's meaning that's haplogroup J. But that's not necessarily how it's meant in scientific papers, etc. whatnot. And in terms of like Levantine DNA, whatnot, I mean, like you can't necessarily put a haplogroup on that, right? Because there's a lot of haplogroups that are Levantine. There's a lot of DNA that's Levantine. And this is why I keep coming back to this concept here. The mixed multitude model is here and it needs to be contended with, man. And it's right there with the CMH. It's no less viable than the CMH. These are some of the papers that we brought out to Dana Richardson and whatnot. Let me do a time check right quick. Oh man, I'm almost on 2 hours already. Let me go ahead and run through this so I can get to the mountain of comments in the comment section. The history of African gene flow into Southern Europeans, Levantines, and Jews. So this is something that we were talking about, and I will just quickly jump to the chase. Levantine groups harbor 4 to 15% African ancestry with an average mixture date of about 32 generations ago, consistent with close political, economic, and cultural links with Egypt in the late Middle Ages. We also detect 3 to 5% sub-Saharan African ancestry in all 8 of the diverse Jewish populations that we analyzed. For the Jewish admixture, we obtained an average estimated date of about 72 generations. An average estimated date of about 72 generations, right? So again, 3 to 5% of the sub-Saharan African ancestry within all of these 8 diverse Jewish populations. Going back an average of 72 generations ago. So this says the same thing here. So I'm just going to jump through that. And I'm going to get to this part here, right? The point estimates, I'm just going to jump down to this part here for sake of time. The point estimates overall 8 populations are between 1600 and 3400 years ago, but with largely overlapping confidence intervals. It is intriguing that the Mizrahi, Irani, and Iraqi Jews, who are thought to descend at least in part from Jews who were exiled to Babylon about 2,600 years ago, share the signal of African admixture, right? So all these groups do, right? And so again, that date that Vocab was talking about, that range that he was talking about, it goes up to 3,300 years or whatnot, 3,250, etc. This range very similar. It goes back to 3,400. And again, we're talking about that same time period of the Exodus, that there was African admixture basically within the founding population, potentially, of world Jewry. The founding population of the mixed multitude, right? And what we see with this is that the DNA that's being connected with this. Let me see, where should I start? Potentially, to gain insight into the African source populations, we carried out PSA analyses, which suggested that the African ancestry in Western Eurasians is at least as closely related to East Africans. Example, HapMap 3, the Luya of Kenya, right, as to West Africans of Nigerian Yorubas and whatnot, right? So this is, and what's interesting about this, the same analysis shows that there is no evidence of relatedness to Chadic populations like Bilal and whatnot, right? And Chad is overwhelmingly R1B. Overwhelmingly R1B. So, like for instance, when GCon was talking about, like, typically when they have some kind of admixture, some of these out African stuff is from R1B or whatnot, right? And again, we talk about the R1B back migration into Africa all day, right? This is saying opposite to that. This is saying no. The African admixture we see that we see here is consistent with the Luya population in Kenya and in the Nigerian population, the Yoruba population in Nigeria, whatnot, but not these Chadic peoples and whatnot. It's a big deal. There is sub-Saharan DNA within modern Jewish and Middle Eastern populations from 3 to 15%. That is consistent with the Luya of Kenya and the Yoruba of Nigeria from admixture, potentially 3,400 years ago. That's nothing to sneeze at, fam. That's a big deal, fam. That's a big deal. Supplementary materials for Palestine North African genomes linked Near Eastern and Sub-Saharan African human populations. Yeah, I'm gonna run through this real quick. Cut to the chase. Talking about something real interesting is that a more recent link is the spread of Bronze Age Levant-like ancestry in Sub-Saharan Africa together with agriculture during the Bantu expansion. This is something that Ibri likes to bring on, is the Neolithic Levantine DNA. So again, you kind of want to see things both ways, right? Are you seeing migrations both ways? Are you seeing like African migrations into Levant? Are you seeing Levantine migrations into Africa, right? And this is something that Ibri likes to point out all the time is the Neolithic Levantine DNA coming into Sub-Saharan Africa. The Neolithic Levantine DNA coming into Sub-Saharan Africa. And to further punctuate this point, in reconstructing prehistoric African population structure, it breaks this point down, right? That this Neolithic Levantine DNA that we can see plus or minus 2.8%, or 2.8% plus or minus 6.6%. So 2.2 to 3.4%. We find this Neolithic Levantine DNA within Mandinkas from West Africa. The Mandinka from the West African coast are fitted. The West African coast are fitted as having 2.8 plus or minus 0.6 11% related ancestry. So we see it going both ways. We see Levantine gene flow coming into West Africa, and we see sub-Saharan African gene flow going into Levant. Again, there's Neolithic era Levantine DNA within modern Mandinka of West Africa from 2.2 to 3.4%. When you do the plus minus 0.6. Now here's what's interesting, right? So if I go look at like these groups that I'm talking about, the Luya, the Yoruba, the Mandinka, whatnot, they have some diverse haplogroups, and they have some that overlap. The Luya and the Yoruba got some overlapping haplogroups, suggesting some kind of east-west migration and whatnot. Very similar to what the Igbo are talking about. And the Yoruba and the Igbo got a lot of haplogroups that overlap and whatnot. But look at how diverse this is amongst just those three groups right there, right? The haplogroups found within the populations of the Luya, the Yoruba, and the Mandinka are very diverse. We got haplogroup A, B, E1A, E1B1A, E1B1B, E2, R1B, fam, etc. That's not just you. You can't just broad brush and just white people like no, you don't count. No, fam. This is so if we're gonna apply the concept of phenotype is fluid or whatnot, I need the urban apologists to stop being like, okay, all you black people from West Africa got the same lineage. No, we don't. No, we don't. That's not how this works, man. We're a mixed multitude, just like the Jewish diaspora, just like the biblical storyline, etc. Just like a bunch of different diaspora groups that have diverse haplogroups and whatnot. So again, this isn't going to fly. It's just like it should be easy to agree that E1B1A is not, and it's unjustifiable to claim that E1B1A is the Israelite haplogroup. It should be also just as easy to agree that excluding E1B1A or any other haplogroup from the mixed multitude of Israel is also unjustified. Also unjustified. Went through that. Let's see here. Went through that. Went through that. Here we go. I'm about to close it out right here, fam. Examining the historical claims and whatnot. So this is the basic historical breakdown that you're going to find vocab given, and breaking it down to Hebrew Israelism. What he breaks down is Hebrew Israelism and whatnot, right? This is not what we espouse. This is the history the vocab espouses, right? That it begins in the 1890s with William Saunders Crowdy and Frank Cherry receiving visions that Black Americans are the true Jews, Israelites of the Bible. In 1919, we get the Commandment Keepers with Wentworth Arthur Matthews, who taught a form of Black Judaism. In 1969, we get the rise of One West Hebrew Israelites, camp-style street preaching, the 12 Tribes charts, Lashon Kadash, etc., via Ava Bibbins and whatnot. And I do believe some of the One Westers put Ava Bibbins stuff into like 1941, etc., whatnot, right? But this is basically the rough idea we're going to get, right? Now, if you watch me debate Zadok, right, or not Zadok, excuse me, dear Lord, excuse me, Garfield. I wanted to see Zadok debate Garfield, excuse me. If I really wanted to see that with him, like I'd love to see them two interact. I was thinking about that earlier, my fault. So if you watch me debate Garfield or whatnot, we had a dialogue / debate that turned into a debate over on Bereans that you can see on my channel. I'm going to air it in full here as well. On the YAP Scholarship channel. I definitely established, and he agreed that I established West African Jewry and Hebrew populations prior to colonization or whatnot, prior to colonialism and whatnot, right? And again, I was pointing to also Jewish congregations that were not One West like, and that were not racist and none of that type of stuff, that did not demarcate European Jewry in any way, shape, or form, consider themselves brethren, etc., whatnot. That were started by legit rabbis that were ordained rabbis, etc. like the Morzine Temple, etc. From 1890 that went from 1899 to 1929. I also pointed in that debate towards again, and this is something that Vocab was talking about, was the recognition of Igbo Jews by Beit Deans and whatnot, by the Obadiah Alliance and whatnot. And I'm definitely going to be doing a very long, in-depth video on the Igbo, the Obadiah Alliance, the claims of the ruling, etc., of the Beit Din, etc., the DNA claims in there, and also what happened when Rabbi Demota went to Nigeria to go study the Igbo himself, because he went and did an intense study, which I thought was fascinating, and recorded what he did on a day-to-day basis. It was making daily recordings that he uploaded to the internet or whatnot. Fantastic information. But there's definitely a culture that's there that needs to be recognized. But the point is, there is an alternative actual history of actual African Jewry in America that needs to be recognized, that came through the slave trade, that has nothing to do with the Hebrew Israelite concept, nothing to do with the Saunders and Cherry stuff, nothing to do with the Commandment Keepers, nothing to do with Abba Bivens and whatnot, nothing to do with anything racist, nothing to do with anything extreme, etc. We're talking about actual real history. Actual real history. But on top of that, the urban apologists are now citing this same history, or they're citing books that have the same history in it. And shout out to Dr. Vince Bantu. He literally pointed out the fact that these books point out that there was Jewry in West Africa prior to colonialism. And he pointed that out because he was proving Christianity from West Africa at the same time period, wasn't it, right? Now, if you've seen on my channel, you've seen me go into this book here and go into the sources and whatnot. I'll break them down again here on this channel when I talk about the Igbo, etc. But I won't do that right now. But this book, Corpus of Early Arabic Sources for West African History, and other books. But this is the book that they were all touting and whatnot. This book 100% corroborates Jews in West Africa prior to colonialism. 100%. 100% does. And again, this is a vocab and his man's Adam Coleman on Sonnetta's channel and whatnot, flashing the book talking about how it proves Christianity in West Africa prior to colonialism. So what's good for the goose is good for the gander, my G. We got to start applying the same methodology in equal fashion. And I'm going to end it right here because Vocab, again, himself has admitted on my channel to me personally that, again, Semitic DNA came to the Americas via the transatlantic slave trade, even though in minute amounts. So if there's a Semitic population, did they convert anybody? Is there a mixed multitude with them when they came over? These questions got to get answered, fam. And this is why you can't exclude people based upon the mixed multitude concept, because you have a reason. You're admitting right off the rip that there's a reason for there to be a mixed multitude in West Africa because there was a Semitic population there. Let me make sure I'm not forgetting it right quick. No, I'm good for right now. Leave it there for right now. Leave it there for right now. Do it like this. Let me see what's popping off in just over 2 hours. I was trying to get under 2 hours. My fault, family. My fault. Had y'all here a little too late. A little too late. Let me go through this chat and see what I missed so far. Let me see here. Y'all going in. I gotta catch up right quick. Yeah. No, that's what's up. Appreciate the conversation in the chat, man. So let me see if I got any questions I can find. So, man, this is why I love YAP. YAP had my back. My man Blacktastic was out here asking my polymorphisms, and my man Sean Harris came out. I was like, I got you, Moji. I got you. Shout out to the OG. Shout out to both OGs. But real quick, let me see if y'all got any questions. Blah, blah, blah. Interesting. Mr. Blacktask is saying that vocab got most of his information from Jacob Dorman's book called The Rise of American Black Israelite Religions. Interesting. Yeah. DNA is a hard science that can change some people's minds and perspectives. I'm one of them. For me, it was mostly on Samaritan and Yemenite Jews. Yeah, DNA changed my mind on a lot of stuff. Like it was a very DNA has been a very intriguing process. Very intriguing process that opened my eyes to a lot of stuff. And once you start dealing with DNA, it is a problem, fam. I mean, you really can't unsee what you see at that juncture. You really can't. Now, let me see what my family's saying. Okay, let me go up a bit more. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Man, shout out to the YAP family in the building. Yeah. I don't really see any more questions. I see a bunch of great comments and whatnot. Yeah, I could do a show on these comments on itself. Man, talk to him. Talk to him, OG. Talk to him, OG. That's, man, that one right there is a hard one to deal with. Sub-Saharan African DNA goes back to about 1400 BC in 8 different sections of modern Jewry. Like that's, again, like, you know how different it is, like how different of an apologetic it would be to go to African Americans, go to Black people, even go to Hebrew Israelites and be like, you know what? Like, I don't know if you're a Jake or not. I don't know if you're a descendant of Israel or not. You know what I'm saying? But what I can tell you is that we know that sub-Saharan African admixture into the mixed multitude was there. It was there during the time of the Exodus. And not only that, it's consistent with people that you're probably related to in West Africa. So this like you got a connection to this mixed multitude on a legit historical concept, man. Like I hear y'all on the Imago dating. No, it's cool. I'm not even mad at that one, right? However, like this is a game changer, fam. Like this mixed multitude model is a legit game changer for multiple reasons. One, yes, it's a proof for the Bible, fam. It's right up there, right up there as viable as the CMH, and I may even argue more so, depending on how you look at certain things, right? But on top of that, this puts a whole another arrow in the apologetic quiver in terms of disarming somebody's racism, man. And on top of that, also answering legit questions people in the church actually have. Questions that when they don't get answered, people start walking away from the church, man. So as an apologist, if you're trying to keep urban people within your church or whatnot, you might want to start looking at stuff like this, man, and answering questions a little bit differently. But I would also love to see if you have any issues with the model. Well, show us what the pushback is. Because as of yet, we have yet to see any pushback. And we're hearing people say that we're off, but we're not seeing any reasons as to why we're off. We're just hearing the claim. So we're not going to get crazy with it. We can keep it respectful, fam. We can even go on your channel and have a conversation, okay? But we need to talk about this CMH model versus this mixed multitude model and why one's more viable than the other, etc. And why the CMH should be used to rule out anybody from being part of the mixed multitude, or national Israel is another way of saying it. Hey, my mans. Hey, shout out to Apple Group R1B in the building, you know what I'm saying? Part the mixed multitude, you know what I'm saying? All day. I'll talk about again, the majority of the mixed multitude is what it looks like genetically, historically, from the mummies we find in the area, is gonna have like a large base of J, R1B, and E. Them three was kicking it hard. Which is also, we can talk about. So R1B, you got the Yamnaya population, right? With haplogroup E, you got the YAP population, right? Yeah, it's YAP Naya all day. YAP Naya all day in the building. Thick as Steve, you heard? But with that, let me see what else we got here. Okay, so good question. Oh, missed it. Ezekiel Ben Yisrael says, so 1400 BC, we were in Asia and sub-Saharan Africa. So when you're saying we, if you're talking about like the Luya and your populations, no, I'm not saying that they were in and so it depends on what you mean by Asia. Like if you're talking about Western Asia, like yeah, that's what it's saying. Like Western Asia being like the Levant, and like etc. Yeah, like so. This is what it's saying. Like so, the admixture, you can see it going into those populations and whatnot, and you can see living team admixtures coming in even prior to that, actually. So, circa 1400 BC, I take even a slightly later date. However, it doesn't even matter for the Exodus and whatnot. Yeah, we're seeing the right admixture in terms of if you want to use something to prove a biblical date with. I mean, that's a pretty big. It's a pretty big proof right there when you're talking about 8 modern Jewish populations that have this ancient admixture in their DNA. Okay, hold up. And if so, did we half go into Asia and half go down into West and Central Africa from the Green Sahara? Oh, now we're getting to the Green Sahara questions, bro. Okay, you trying to open up a whole different can of worms on that one. That right there is going to be a subject of a big show we'll talk about, because I'm gonna I can't talk about the Green Sahara without bringing Ibri on, because Ibri loves talking about the Green Sahara and whatnot, and we mad if I talk about it without him. So we will definitely cover the migrations out of that, because we're definitely working on the Green Sahara model at the moment as well too, because the Green Sahara is it's an important thing to understand, and it also dispels this whole West African isolation that the people need to get rid of and whatnot, because the people that came off the slave ship were not all isolated to West Africa for all of eternity. That's not how that was. See why you out to see Rue out here trying to take headshots and whatnot. Interesting enough, the Luya, Kikuyu, Yoruba, and Igbo all have EL515. That's Garfield's marker. LOL. So that's what I'm saying. And when you get into like even when like what Rambi Lona talks about, even though we can disagree on how he uses DNA or how he understands it or whatnot, he's corrected when he's looking at like, oh, I'm seeing the fact that I'm not just 100% West African. I got this Kenyan in me, and I also have this Middle Eastern admixture or whatnot. This seems to denote this seems to corroborate the oral tradition we have about having a migration over 1,000 years ago from the East. Like, yeah, 100%. And when you see like the EL515, yeah, and And when you see EO515 in the S&P tracker, that's even more interesting for you. But again, the fact that you see the people in Kenya and Nigeria having the same DNA and the same haplogroup or whatnot, not like I'm talking like 100% same subclade, right? Not like related subclades. I'm talking about same, right? Oh, it's looking like there was it legitimately looks like that east to west migration is something to look at. Oh, see the OG. See, when I call the OG ladies, when they see you messed up, I need you to go into it, sir. Yep, I'll take that lit because I'm definitely gonna jump off right quick. But OG, I promise you, we will get into this and break down why it's important for skin doctrine as well and whatnot, right? Because that's an important. See, that's one of the things that we're trying to do with this is. And the urban apologist shouldn't have any trepidations when dealing with YAP when it comes to DNA now, because we're literally trying to use this to dispel the skin doctrine, right? Yes, you're going to have to swallow a bitter pill because when dealing with YAP, we were going to make you realize, or not make you realize, we're just going to show you what the truth is, that no matter how you slice it, there is a Hebrew population in West Africa, right? There is also a Jewish population, like in terms of like the mixed multitude, etc. Like there's Christian populations, Muslim populations, all that in West Africa, right? You can't just erase them because it's uncomfortable in an apologetic conversation where you've been saying for years, like none of you can be. Well, cool, got you. I hear you've been saying that, and I'm not even mad at you for what you used to say, right? Like y'all used to tell me in vocab in particular, you can't be a Moor, you can't be a Jew, none of that from West Africa. Okay. I've personally shown vocab otherwise when they came to the Moor stuff, right? I've personally shown the world or whatnot different when it comes to the Jewish concept from West Africa, right? So let's have the conversation, fam. It ain't gotta be a beef. And no one's making the conversation, the argument that everybody from West Africa is a Jew, or even the majority, right? That's not what's happening at all. The most uncomfortable part is that if the populations that are talked about as having Jewish populations in West Africa, whatnot, or admixture of Jewry, whatnot, or admixture of Hebraic populations, because not all of it's the same, right? If it pans out like history's talking about, it does mean that a large portion, almost 90+% of African Americans do have admixture with Hebrew and Jewish population from West Africa. To what percentage? It's going to differ, but almost the entirety of us are going to have that admixture. Now, am I making an argument for the autosomal Israelite? No, that's not what I'm saying. But I am saying it's so. For instance, it's known that 20% of the Latino population in America has around 5% Sephardic Jewish DNA or more, or Maghrebi Jewish DNA or more, right? 20% have 5%, right? That's a lot of people. That's a lot of people out of the Latino population in the Americans. I'm talking about like, and this is something that Rabbi Harry Rosenberg's talking about, right? Harry Rosenberg will go around saying that I believe that 80% of Americans have connection with the Igbo who we're going to say are Jews, right? That's gonna catch a lot of people's ears on that level, right? But what needs to be understood is probably even more than 80%, closer to 90+% have admixture with populations that had historically reported Hebrew and Jewish populations amongst them in West Africa. Most notably, the Sahel. The Western Sahel is the most Hebrew part of West Africa, the most Jewish part of West Africa. Let's see. Here we go. Yes, I'm able to see your comments. Let me see what you got. Do you have the same position on the Exodus as you did in your previous videos? In terms of my dating or what, Spirit Born? So me as an individual, I believe that the Exodus was around 1540 BC. I believe that the Bible gives two dates, or gives two possible dates. That, for me, I think they all wrap up into one. But there's two possible dates you can get from reading the Bible, which is 1540 or 1446. out here hitting home runs. What's crazy is how many urban apologists ignore their own version of skin doctrine by trying to delineate Black Americans from Israelite descent. That's the one right there. And that's where it starts to look a little bit crazy, because at this juncture, now we're in a moment to where like, hey, like the cat's out of the bag, fam. Like this is what I'm saying in terms of this right here and whatnot. The cat's out of the bag. Like you're already pointing to the information. Like you're already trying to corroborate Christians being in West Africa with the same information that corroborates Jews being in West Africa. I'm somebody who's gonna read both of them things all day because it's reality and it's history, and there's nothing to run from. Oh, let me stop playing and do it like that so y'all can see it. Yeah, these are all the urban apologists right here that are citing Dr. Vince Bantu and this information in this book about there being Christians in West Africa prior to colonialism. And this includes people like Damon Richardson who are running from YAP gang. These are all the known Christian apologists who have cited this book here, Dr. Vince Bantu, and Christians being in West Africa prior to colonialism. Well, look at Ru out here taking headshots. Yo, just study that right there about where EO 515 is. He's talking about Turkey, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Oman, the United Arab Emirates, Yemen, Morocco, Libya, Spain, Senegal, Mauritania, Nigeria, Ghana, Mexico, New Mexico, Texas, Mississippi, Virginia. Yeah, go ahead, you. EO 515 is alone is part of many groups that claim Hebraic man. Yeah. But this is I'm gonna shut it down right here, fam, because we're running up on 2.5 hours, and that's way too long. But it's okay to start sifting through this, but not only is it okay, it's necessary, because if you don't, y'all are gonna start looking real hypocritical real soon. Because like vocab started off saying, there's no compelling reason to believe such. There's no compelling reason to believe Hebraic or Israelite heritage, ethnicity, etc., nationality, etc. Well, we have other compelling evidence now, and not just any compelling evidence. We have genetic evidence, but we also have historical evidence that you're also citing to prove Christianity in West Africa. So we got to keep it a buck, fam. You got to keep it a buck. And here's what you don't want to do, fam. Like, you don't want to not take us serious and then wait for the camp to start suiting up our team, fam. Because the pseudos is coming. And on top of that, you got people, you got the Darbyites and whatnot, like Benai Israel, that who are going to pseudo up our information every chance they get, and they're trying to. They keep trying to. Trying to tell people like E1B1A was found within the Muslim institutions. No, it wasn't. Stop lying. And a whole bunch of other nonsense. But instead of you don't see, this is what I'm saying. Like, it's better for everybody all the way around. Camps, the Darbyites, the urban apologists, etc. The real sincere African Jewry, if we sift through this information real quick and see who's who and who's talking about what arguments are real, what arguments are fluff, right? Because there's a lot of fluffy arguments out there, fam, and that's not what YAP's talking about. We're talking about the factual stuff, and we're not trying to speak past what the information is giving us, right? We're not trying to be pseudo at all, right? But now here's what it is, fam. Like, at this juncture, like, we can catch y'all being pseudo on DNA, and we're trying to be cool about it and just dialogue about the thing right quick. Slow down for everybody. I mean, there's gonna be other people who ain't gonna be cool about it. They're gonna look at this. They're gonna see, oh, there's the chink in the armor right there. Let's go. Let's go. It's up to y'all how y'all want to do with that, fam. YAP gonna do what YAP gonna do. YAP gonna do what YAP gonna do. Kedra killing him. He said pseudos always use truth as bait. And on top of that, pseudos always die at their own source. And that's the problem. That's the whole point. Pseudos die at their own source. You see, a lot of what I did is I actually went through the studies that vocab was talking about, and then went through other studies. When you see my debate with Garfield, I go through his sources, and then I add stuff on top of it. Right? Pseudos always die at their own source. And it's going to be, I mean, if people keep running from the DNA film, it's going to be a problem. It really is going to be a problem, because if you don't have a realistic conversation with you do have the Darbets who are suiting up the heck out the team fan, suiting up the DNA stuff like you wouldn't believe, in such a way that it's digestible for other people and they run with it. And when you're out here making mistakes on the CMH or whatnot, you got nothing to come back with. That's going to be very problematic going forward. Very problematic going forward. But with that, fam, I'm going to shut this thing down. I appreciate you for your time. I appreciate you for your comments. I appreciate you for your thoughts. Appreciate you for your dialogue. Appreciate you for your critiques. Any critiques you have, please leave them down below. Any questions, please leave them down below. Any arguments you have, please leave them down below. You know what I'm saying? And with that, you already know what it is. You already know what it is. Hitting them with that. Yeah. Where we at with this? Where am I joining at? Where am I joining at? Where am I joining at? There we go. Shout out to everybody in the chat, fam. Yeah.
I was shocked that Dante was next on the chopping block. They hit Dante. Then they hit me, which is fine. And now Benaya, who's next? Who's next? That's my next video. Who's next? Who's next? Who's next? Who's next?
Next. Who's next?
Did he ever hurt
next?
you?
I got milk, baby.
The IBF middleweight champion of the world, James Lights Out.
That one got on. He got down hurt a little bit.
It's over.
better be careful. He's down. He's hurt. Will they stop this fight? Tony trying to finish him off. The towel is thrown in. I'll tell you. The towel in.